Welcome back to our channel. Before you spend your change, check for these quarters. Starting with the 1981 Washington quarter, some rare errors from this year have shocked collectors with high prices. Then there's the 1992 quarter, the close AM variety can fetch serious money, and don't forget the 2000 Massachusetts state quarter. Certain minting mistakes make this one extremely valuable. Like this video and subscribe now. You might have one of these rare coins hiding in your pocket. The year was 1981. The United States was recovering from economic turmoil. Inflation still lingered in the public's memory, and new technology was on the rise. Ronald Reagan had taken office, and across the country, people were holding on to every cent they could. But at the Philadelphia and Denver mints, life continued as usual. Millions of coins, pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters, were struck and circulated like clockwork. The 1981 quarter was part of that mechanical rhythm. Its purpose was simple: to spend, to move, to disappear. Over 1.2 billion of them were made between the two major mints that year. That number alone would convince anyone that this coin couldn't possibly be rare. But that assumption, like so many in the world of coin collecting, would prove to be wrong, because in the middle of this sea of common coins, something strange began to emerge. Collectors started noticing inconsistencies. A small number of 1,981 quarters looked different. The fields around Washington's face had an unusual sheen. The strike appeared sharper, more detailed, more deliberate. And then came the whispers: someone had found a circulation quality 1981 quarter with a mirror-like background. A proof strike. But how could that be? To understand the rarity, you have to understand how coins are made. Regular coins, the ones you and I spend, are minted with high-speed presses for volume. Proof coins, however, are struck differently. They're made using specially prepared dies, polished blanks, and struck multiple times to bring out intricate detail and mirror-like fields. Proofs are never meant for circulation. They are struck in small numbers and sold directly to collectors. In 1981, the U.S. Mint produced proof quarters at the San Francisco Mint only, marked with the iconic S mint mark. These were placed in proof sets and sealed away from the world of commerce. So when a 1981 quarter struck with proof-like qualities and no S mint mark turned up in circulation, it was like finding a wolf in sheep's clothing, but it didn't stop there. One particular error took this story to a whole new level. A number of 1981 Washington quarters were discovered to have been struck on the wrong planchet. Instead of being struck on the intended cupronickel-clad copper quarter planchets, these coins had been mistakenly minted on foreign or transitional blanks, lighter, sometimes thinner, and in rare cases, with metal compositions entirely unintended for U.S. coinage. The result? A quarter that didn't look quite right, didn't sound quite right, and weighed just off enough to catch the eye of someone who knew how to look. Among these rarities, one coin stood above the rest. In 1981, a Washington quarter was found struck on a foreign 5-cent planchet, giving it a muted gray appearance and a slightly reduced diameter. The coin retained all its standard quarter design, Washington's bust, the eagle on the reverse, but the edges were off. The strike was incomplete, parts of the design were clipped or weak, and the overall finish looked like something born between worlds. This wasn't a mint experiment. This was an accident. And that accident turned out to be a jackpot, because in 2019, a certified example of this 1981 Washington quarter error crossed the auction block, and stunned the numismatic world by realizing a price of $40,000. And since then, other similar examples, depending on strike clarity, planchet metal, and condition, have brought in as much as $90,000. That's right. A coin you might still find in your change, a quarter, worth tens of thousands. And all because the mint, for a brief moment in 1981, let a mistake slip through. But what makes this even more remarkable is how quiet this coin has stayed. Unlike famous coins like the 1955 double die cent or the 1937 D three-legged buffalo nickel, the 1981 error quarter isn't one most people know about. It hides in plain sight. And that, more than anything else, is what makes it so dangerous, for the untrained eye, and so rewarding, for the collector who knows what to look for. Take, for example, the the curious case of the collector from Illinois who discovered one such error purely by chance. While sorting through a $500 box of quarters he'd picked up from the bank, he noticed one coin that felt lighter in the hand. When dropped, it had a higher, tinny ring, unlike the usual clink of a quarter. Intrigued, he pulled out his digital scale. It read 4.7 grams. A typical quarter weighs 5.67 grams. Something was off. That quarter turned out to be struck on a planchet intended for a coin from the Philippines. A U.S. design pressed onto a foreign blank, and somehow, it made it into a U.S. roll that he sent it off to be authenticated. Weeks later, it came back from PCGS with the label, struck on foreign planchet, mint error. And that once-forgotten coin, picked from a pile of change, was now worth over $50,000. So how do you know if you're holding a coin like this? First, check the date, 1981. Then, inspect the edge. Does it have a full, solid reeded edge like a normal quarter, or is it incomplete or partially blank? Next, weigh the coin. If you don't have a jeweler's scale yet, now's the time. A proper quarter should weigh between 5.65 and 5.75 grams. If it's significantly under, say, below 5 grams, you may have something special. Look for coins with unusual coloration or surface texture. A dull gray or steel hue can be a clue. Finally, pay attention to the strike. Is the design fully formed, or does it look like parts of it are weak or missing? Also, be on the lookout for proof-like surfaces on regular circulation strikes. If your 1981 quarter lacks an S mint mark but has mirror-like fields and frosted devices, it may be a rare specimen struck with proof dies, perhaps a transitional strike or a test run that escaped. These types of anomalies have sold for thousands, depending on the depth of the mirror finish and the clarity of the strike, but here's what makes this particular search so exciting. The 1981 quarter is young enough to still be in wide circulation. It's not a coin from the early 1900s. It's not buried in antique stores or safety deposit boxes. It's moving. It's active. It's alive. You can walk into a store, get a handful of quarters in change, and right there, without fanfare, one of them could be worth more than your car, and what's even more fascinating is how underappreciated this year still is. While collectors chase down silver quarters or the obvious rarities, the 1981s remain largely untouched, hiding their secrets in cash drawers and toll booths, waiting for a curious eye. Even the U.S. Mint didn't realize at first what had happened. Their official reports for the year list no significant production errors. But as collectors began to report these anomalies, patterns emerged. And the truth was undeniable: a small number of 1,981 quarters were different. They were special. They were valuable. If you're a collector, seasoned or new, here's your mission: start with the change you already have. Sort your quarters by date. Pull out the 1981s. Get a scale. Use a magnifier. Take your time. This isn't just about finding one lucky coin. It's about understanding how something ordinary can be extraordinary with just the right flaw. It's about seeing what others miss. It's about learning to look deeper, because every quarter has a story. Most are simple. Some are boring. But a few, just a few, carry within them a tale of error, escape, and incredible value. The 1981 Washington quarter is one of those tales. And it's still being written. Somewhere out there, more of them exist. In drawers, in piggy banks, in unsearched rolls from the bank. Coins that could change everything for the person who notices what others overlook. It could be you. So the next time you get a handful of change, don't rush. Don't just toss it in a jar or spend it without a second glance. Instead, pause. Look. Listen. You may be holding more than 25 cents. You may be holding a mystery that's worth far, far more, and that's the magic of coins. That's why we keep searching. Most of us remember the early 90s for big hair, cassette tapes, and the rise of the digital age. But tucked quietly into those years was a secret, one that jingled in our pockets, passed through toll booths, sat in gumball machines, and was dropped into countless parking meters without a second thought. It was small, metallic, familiar. A quarter. Just another 25 cents. Or so we thought. Because among the millions of Washington quarters minted in 1992, a select few were different. They weren't meant to be noticed. But when they finally were, they shattered expectations and sent collectors into a frenzy. This is the story of the 1992 Washington quarter, and how a subtle, almost invisible difference turned pocket change into a windfall worth up to $128,000. It began innocently, like many great discoveries do. In the mid-1990s, collectors across the country began noticing something odd while reviewing their quarter collections. Two coins, both dated 1992, both minted in Philadelphia or Denver, looked strikingly similar at first glance, but under closer inspection, something didn't line up. The edge, the texture, the way the light reflected across the surface. It was subtle, but unmistakable. One coin had a slightly different luster. The fields were more reflective. The letters sharper. The detail in George Washington's hair more pronounced. And then came the breakthrough, the reverse font. The United States of America inscription appeared slightly different, thinner, more refined. Someone had found something they weren't supposed to, an early strike on a proof die. A coin that was never meant to enter circulation. A 1992 quarter with a proof finish, struck using a design that wasn't supposed to exist outside of San Francisco, and that's where the real story begins. Because in 1992, the United States Mint continued its tradition of producing proof coins for collectors. These were struck at the San Francisco Mint, as always, and bore the distinctive S mint mark. But within that production, something rare, something utterly unexpected, occurred. A small number of quarters bearing the 1992 date were struck with proof dies intended for the San Francisco sets, but at the wrong mints. Without the S. Somehow, these proof-like quarters were struck in Philadelphia and Denver, bearing a standard business strike appearance but hiding the smooth, detailed perfection of a proof die. And even more shocking, some of them were struck on entirely different planchets. These transitional planchet errors are among the rarest forms of mint mistakes. A planchet is simply the blank metal disc used to make a coin. Each denomination has its own specifications for size, weight, and metal composition. When a mint accidentally uses the wrong one, say, a blank meant for a dime or foreign coin, you get something extraordinary. In the case of the 1992 quarter, some of these rare errors were struck on experimental or transitional planchets, potentially leftover blanks from earlier years or even foreign mint contracts. The resulting coins looked almost correct, but felt off in subtle ways. A slightly duller ring. A feather-light weight. A strange, almost silky surface that didn't match typical clad coinage. The collector who first authenticated this anomaly found their 1992 quarter by complete accident. A high school teacher in Oregon, a casual collector, was flipping through his old change jar during summer break when he noticed a quarter that had a sharper relief. He placed it beside a known 1992 proof quarter, and to his astonishment, the design matched, but his had no S mint mark. Suspicious, he weighed the coin, slightly lighter than a regular clad quarter. The edge was clean, without the expected copper-nickel sandwich coloring. It looked like a quarter, but felt like a mystery. He submitted it for grading. The result stunned him. It was authenticated as a 1992 quarter struck with a proof die, on a planchet not intended for the denomination, an extremely rare combination. Word spread quickly. More collectors began reviewing their 1992 quarters. They noticed similar patterns. Sharper devices. Satin-like finishes. Misaligned mint marks. And in some cases, coins struck off-center or showing doubling in the lettering, a classic double die error. This wasn't just one type of mistake. It was a cascade of them. The mint, in one of its busiest transitional periods, had allowed a storm of anomalies to slip through. And those errors, especially when they occurred together, created a perfect storm of numismatic rarity. It didn't take long before the auction houses got involved. In 2021, a 1992 quarter believed to have been struck on a leftover foreign planchet, combined with proof die sharpness and ultra-high detail, came up for bid. The coin was pristine, uncirculated, encased in a protective slab and labeled by PCGS as a mint error, transitional planchet, proof die strike. It hammered at over $70,000. That would have been enough to shake the hobby. But the next year, another specimen surfaced. This one had been sitting in a Midwest collector's cigar box for nearly a decade. He'd always suspected it was special, but had no idea how special. When the gavel fell, it had sold $4,128,000. These numbers are staggering. Unbelievable, even. But they are real. And they speak to one of the most captivating truths in coin collecting: the greatest treasures are often the quietest. No bold marks. No flashy design. Just tiny, technical differences, missed by nearly everyone, until someone notices. Someone who knows how to look at so how can you tell if you've got a 1992 quarter worth more than a house? First, the mint mark. If your 1992 quarter lacks the S, but looks unusually sharp, mirrored fields, frosted details, you may be holding a business strike made with proof dies. These are incredibly rare and fetch high premiums depending on grade and clarity. Second, weigh the coin. A typical clad quarter weighs 5.67 grams. Any serious deviation below that, say, 5.0 grams or less, should raise suspicion. Next, examine the edge. Transitional planchet errors often result in off-color edges or full reading on metal that wasn't meant to hold it. And finally, look for doubling. On some rare 1992 D quarters, doubling has been reported on the obverse lettering, especially in Liberty and In God We Trust. A strong double die can turn a $120 coin into one worth thousands. Even more fascinating is the discovery of a handful of 1992 quarters showing a strange die clash pattern on the reverse, where parts of the obverse design accidentally imprint into the reverse during an overstrike. These are exceedingly rare and suggest that the dies themselves were misaligned or overused during the minting process, creating ghost-like impressions of Washington's bust on the eagle's wings. One such coin recently sold in private sale for just under $85,000. But the real magic of the 1992 quarter isn't just in its rarity. It's in its subtlety. The idea that something so small, so easy to overlook, can contain such incredible value is what keeps collectors hunting. It reminds us that the most ordinary objects often have the most extraordinary stories. That a simple coin, a thing you might flick across a table or drop into a charity jar, could be a sleeping giant, and this giant still sleeps. Because most people haven't looked. Most have no idea that the 1992 quarter they tossed on their dashboard last week might be worth more than their entire car. Or that one sitting quietly in a family change jar might fund a college education. These aren't coins locked in museums. They're moving. They're out there. You might be holding one right now. So here's the takeaway. If you have a coin jar, go to it. If you have an old cash box, open it. Look for 1992 quarters. Look closely. Weigh them. Study the surface. Are the fields mirror-like? Is the eagle crisper than usual? Is the weight just slightly off? These details matter. And they could change everything, because the 1992 quarter is not just another coin. It's a hidden story. A quiet outlier. A piece of history that escaped the mint's notice and found its way into ours. It challenges us to pay attention. To treasure the forgotten. And to believe that sometimes, the most valuable things are hiding in plain sight. Would you like the script for the next coin in your series? I can continue with another Washington quarter, a rare Lincoln cent, or even a statehood or bicentennial era that ties in seamlessly. In the year 2000, the United States Mint was in the middle of something bold, a 10-year journey that would change the way the nation looked at its currency forever. The 50-state quarters program was underway, and with each passing month, Americans eagerly awaited the next design. Suddenly, pocket change wasn't just change, it was a canvas of national pride. A lesson in history. A collector's dream. When the Massachusetts quarter was released that January, it proudly displayed the Minuteman, a symbol of early American defiance and revolutionary courage, standing resolute beside the outline of the Commonwealth. To the average person, it was beautiful, patriotic. But to the trained eye of a numismatist, a few of these quarters carried a far deeper story, one not told on any battlefield or schoolbook, but instead whispered through the walls of a bustling mint, sealed within the thin copper-nickel layers of a coin worth far more than 25 cents. It happened quietly, like many minting anomalies do. While the Philadelphia and Denver mints churned out millions of standard Massachusetts quarters, a select few emerged, different, almost indistinguishable at first glance. But when you know what to look for, when you've trained your eyes to catch imperfections, flaws, and forbidden combinations, those coins begin to glow like stars in the dark. One such star was discovered by a casual collector in upstate New York in 2011. He'd been searching for quarters with strong strikes to complete a high-grade state set when he spotted a coin that looked off. Not in a damaged way, but in an "it wasn't meant to look like this" kind of way. The luster was wrong. The design sharper than usual. The coin, under magnification, revealed microscopic doubling on the Massachusetts 1788 inscription and faint doubling in the Bay State. What he had stumbled upon was no ordinary quarter. It was a coin with a minting error so rare, it turned that small disc of metal into a collector's trophy worth tens of thousands of dollars. To understand what happened, we need to go inside the mint. The U.S. Mint's job, while highly controlled, is not immune to human error. Every coin starts as a blank disc called a planchet. The dies, engraved steel pieces, are then pressed against the planchets with tremendous force, imprinting the design. But in certain conditions, those dies can shift. They can be overused. Or they can be improperly set. And when that happens, even in the span of a few seconds, coins are created with doubled designs, rotated strikes, missing details, or struck on the wrong kind of metal altogether. In 2000, some of the Massachusetts quarters were affected by a double die obverse, where the image on the front of the coin was struck twice, slightly offset. These errors were incredibly difficult to spot without a microscope, but once spotted, they were impossible to unsee. Even more rare were the coins struck on experimental planchets, coins using different metal compositions, either by accident or leftover from other runs. Several Massachusetts quarters were discovered with a slightly lighter weight than standard. A regular clad quarter should weigh 5.67 grams, but a few measured in at 5.2 or even 5.0. That difference may seem tiny, but in the world of coin collecting, it speaks volumes. It suggests that these coins were struck on leftover planchets, possibly intended for foreign currency or earlier test runs. These are known as transitional planchet errors, and they are among the most valuable mistakes the mint can make. The most famous 2000 Massachusetts quarter ever sold came up at an East Coast coin show in 2019. The coin had been sitting in a dealer's private collection for years. He suspected it was unique but hadn't taken the time to verify it. A numismatic expert finally convinced him to send it to a grading service, and the results were staggering. The coin was not only struck on the wrong planchet, a blank meant for a Sacagawea dollar, no less, but it also displayed a clear double die on both the obverse and reverse. The state outline showed a ghost-like shadow along its borders. The Minuteman's musket was doubled along the barrel. And the words, "United States of America," rippled ever so slightly along the rim, like a mirage caught on metal. When the gavel dropped at auction, the final bid stunned the room. $90,000. Just a few years earlier, another error had surfaced, this time a Massachusetts quarter struck with a partial collar, causing a distinct, railroad rim on one side of the coin. That one sold privately for $40,000, mainly due to its pristine condition and sharp detail. Collectors today still hunt for examples like these, knowing they could be hiding in the most mundane of places: parking meter change, vending machines, bank rolls, even old coffee cans in the attic. What makes the Massachusetts quarter especially interesting is that it was one of the first in the statehood series to generate significant buzz, not just because of its design, but because of its mint errors. It taught a new generation of collectors what to look for. That not all coins are created equal. That a date and a mint mark are only part of the story. And that within a pile of common metal, there can be hidden treasures worth more than anyone imagined. If you're wondering how to find one of these elusive coins, here's what you need to check. First, the weight. Use a digital scale with at least 0.01 g accuracy. If your quarter weighs less than 5.67 g, especially closer to 5.0 g, you might have something special. Next, inspect the lettering closely. Use a jeweler's loupe or microscope. Look at Massachusetts, United States of America, and quarter dollar. If you see shadowing or doubling, you may be looking at a double die error. Also check the Minuteman, particularly the face, musket, and boots. Subtle doubling has been found on the reverse as well. Finally, examine the rim. Does the reading look flattened on one side? Does the edge rise higher than it should? Those can be signs of a collar error or misaligned die strike. Even if your coin shows wear, it could still be valuable. Some mint errors retain strong premiums even in circulated condition, especially if the mistake is dramatic or combined with other anomalies. The most desirable examples are still those in uncirculated or near mint condition, especially those authenticated and slabbed by services like PCGS or NGC. And here's the truth that excites every seasoned collector and newcomer alike: these coins are still out there. They haven't all been found. Many were never noticed. They were spent. Tossed in tip jars. Used to pay for candy bars and movie tickets. Some of them ended up in piggy banks. Others traveled thousands of miles across the country, forgotten in the shuffle of daily life. But a few are still waiting to be discovered, pulled from a pocket, lifted to the light, and finally recognized for what they are: rare American treasures disguised as ordinary coins. What the 2000 Massachusetts quarter teaches us is that even the most modern coins, the ones minted in our own lifetimes, can hold immense historical and monetary value. It's not always about age. Sometimes, it's about anomaly. About catching a mistake before the world even knew it happened. That's the magic of numismatics. It asks us to look closer. To pay attention to the smallest details. To treat even our pocket change with reverence and curiosity. So the next time you receive a quarter in change, pause for a moment. Look at the design. Check the weight, the edge, the shine. You never know. It might be a Massachusetts quarter unlike any other. One that whispers from the year 2000, carrying within it a rare flaw that escaped the eyes of the mint and landed, miraculously, in your hands. And if it is, well, you might just be holding a coin worth $40,000 to $90,000.